It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Well, the testing, just to set that scene, the testing, and this is part of the problem, in 1998 we did away with local councils doing certification of buildings, and we went to private certification. We also, at that time, the Building Code of Australia, which is a minimum standard, people sometimes forget, and we created this pathway called Deemed to Satisfy, where people putting buildings together could really make up their own rules to an extent about what building componentry satisfied the test. So the government stood back from the late 90s on and took a very light touch. And we had this self-regulatory system. Now, this happened all over the world, and it certainly happened in Australia. So government abrogated the hands-on, invasive, interventionist-type testing and supervision of building, left it to suppliers and builders and developers to really self-assess.
Yeah, deem to satisfy was anything but that. Once the government hands were off this, self-assessing with the aim of safety standards for buildings with this product was, I think you can make the argument, was inverted in the other direction towards how much money can we make, throwing away the safety component. And too bad if you buy into a building not knowing what the building exterior has on it.
And this is where the mischief began. And this is where people started to act motivated by profit and greed. You mentioned the Netflix series. That's largely based on a book by a gentleman called Peter Apps called Show Me the Bodies. And that is an exceptional expose of how this attitude of greed and profit became the driver rather than safety. It really calls into question the way in which we approach building regulation. Now, in the wake of Grenfell, in the wake of Opal Towers, which was the structural collapse of a building in New South Wales, in the wake of that, the New South Wales government has gone back to the old interventionist way of supervising buildings. And I've just completed a research paper which I delivered last week on this topic. And what's interesting is no other state in Australia has followed New South Wales' lead by going back to this system of being more engaged and more involved in the supervision of building by building. It's something that hasn't been picked up around the world yet. So I'm very interested to see how the New South Wales reforms improve the quality of buildings, and whether or not this will be picked up in other states and territories and indeed other jurisdictions around the world.
We are your local source for unbiased, expert insights into the world of real estate. We are not a real estate company. Our only objective is to help you better understand the real estate market.
Yeah, if you have a look at the time to buy, which is a dwelling index, that jumped 10.5% for August and is 37% above last year. As you say, buyer confidence is lifting, and with it, so too, here we go with the run-up to Christmas, the return of FOMO.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I think it's just with the market moving as quickly as it is as well. You have people sort of heading out and going and looking at properties on a Saturday, and then the agents are calling them that afternoon saying, we've got offers in, you need to basically sign a contract. They're not even allowing people really to sort of get to a position where they've got solicitors looking over contracts anymore. They're trying to get, signatures on contracts and presenting them to vendors and getting a deal done that Saturday. So it is that fast. People hit the ground running and think that they've got all their ducks in a row and they're lined up and they're ready to move. But what they don't realize is it is actually that quick, and the decision needs to be made in sort of a few hours. If they don't make it, they're made to feel like that they might miss out on it. And then there's decisions being taken in a very, very quick turnaround time.
You are in Brisbane. It is heating up, as you say. Sharp gains and homes selling within just a matter of days of the listings. Buyers are discovering that hesitation can be costly. But you're a buyer's agent. How difficult is that when these agents are saying, you've got to act now? I mean, as far as the solicitor is concerned, if you're listening to the podcast, make sure that your professionals are across this. Don't feel in any way bullied into making a rushed decision, because that can always lead to nightmares after the contract. But yeah, coming back to you, that's your job, isn't it, to really make sure that everything is lined up and that they're not sort of being too forced into something.
Oh, look, 100%. I feel that just about all of our job is making sure that our clients feel confident and comfortable in the decisions that they are making. And yes, that does come down to a lot of, advice and direction that we can give our clients. But in saying that, if people want to put their contracts through solicitors, and it is so different in every state. In Victoria, the solicitors draw them up. In Brisbane and obviously all the rest of Queensland, it's very different. The agents can draw them up. The new Form 2 that we've seen come in has also changed the environment a little. So there is a bit more protection for the buyers there, but it is still buyers beware. There are still things like your flooding and, koala sanctuary zoning and those sorts of things that need to be considered when you're buying the property. And with this fear of missing out and the FOMO that is happening within the market, it is pushing people into making these really fast, snap decisions. And they are potentially the things that are being missed and not being seen by the buyers. There is a bit of a thing of people are like, oh, it's all hype and all of those sorts of things. But even on this weekend, I had an offer out for a client. They're not local. It was in the $1.4 million range. The agent put so much pressure on for the Saturday afternoon, and we're still waiting today for an actual result. So it's sort of this made up kind of speed that's being forced out into the market that, potentially we don't need to have, but the momentum is there.
Yeah, so you don't want to be fooled is what you're saying with the speed of the market, because some agents will do that. They will just say, hey, we've got all these different offers lining up. You've got to act really fast. Just talking about those $1 million range properties, they are driving the urgency with that particular cohort. Are you surprised, given the last rate cut, just how much heat in that particular range has started to dominate?
Yeah, to be quite honest, 2-3 years ago in the Brisbane market, we were buying that sort of 450 to 600. 100% those transactions would transpire over the course of a weekend. But that shift and entrance level into the market is now more around that $1 million mark. And so you are seeing over a, 12-hour period, really, a transaction transpiring in that early $1 million range. And it is the new sort of real fast moving. You used to be able to have a bit more time. People would be able to do multiple inspections. There'd generally be an inspection during the week and on the weekends. Now you're seeing one inspection happen on a Saturday. That is, it's still only going for 30 minutes, by the way. And then, people are going in and that expectation, especially with an untrained eye, walking through a property, is this the one for us? And then throwing offers in by that afternoon. It's sort of this really confronting, I think, situation. It is a lot of money that people are looking at spending, but with 1.1 being the median house price for Brisbane now, it's actually our entry level. And so you have all these first home buyers out there and they are spending $1 million as their first purchase. And it's terrifying. They're being locked into these contracts at that price point. And yeah, it is about sort of being prepared before you get even into the property as to what's happening in that suburb, that street, that area, if people can find the time to do that.
Barbara is now 94 and does not look her age. So much class and poise. So check that out on Club Random with Bill Maher. It is a good one. Let's catch up with Emmanuel Marius, who is in Hobart. He's in the money lending business based there. And a very good morning to you, Emmanuel. Welcome into the Real Estate Breakfast. Have you heard of Barbara Eden before?
I actually haven't, surprisingly. My age probably doesn't help.
You're not alone. There'll be a lot of people saying, who is Barbara Eden? I think Nicole Kidman played her in the movie of the same name. Yeah, so government incentives, we should talk about those because there was some announcements a couple of days ago.
Yeah, it was actually quite exciting. The Albanese government announced yesterday that they have changed the first home guarantee scheme. And for the listeners that are not aware of that, the first home guarantee scheme is basically a scheme where the borrower just needs to contribute a minimum deposit of 5%. And they're not required to pay any lender's mortgage insurance. And for anyone who is not aware of lender's mortgage insurance, it's an insurance premium that you generally need to pay if you have less than a 20% deposit. So the reality how it all works is, and how you got to think about it, is you put contributing a 5% deposit and the government will be paying that LMI premium on your behalf. So it's quite exciting. Most states actually had a significant cap increase. New South Wales increased to around 1.2, which was quite nice. And where I'm based in Hobart, there was about a $100,000 increase on the maximum purchase price that you can buy. And the biggest thing that really stood out was there's actually no income cap. And what I mean by income cap, in previous years, you were only able to earn up to a certain annual figure to be eligible for that particular scheme. Now they've actually completely scrapped that. So no matter how much you're earning and you are a first home buyer, you're going to be eligible to obtain that scheme, which is very exciting to hear.
Things have changed rapidly over the last 5 years, just in terms of the way that people have got to be educated. Government incentives, there have been a number of changes along the way over the last 5 years. People, for whatever reason, they can be sort of forgetful in this area. Is that something that you find, particularly with the education of mortgage money, borrowing, etc.? It's continually evolving.
Yeah, absolutely. I think education's a big core of our business. We always say it, we're an education company that specialises in financial services. As you know, you don't finish school knowing how to buy a house. You just get taught how to do 1 + 1 and see you later, off to the real world. So our job is to obviously educate borrowers what they can and can't do. And that's a very big key component, especially with first home buyers, because generally speaking, a lot of first home buyers would be seeking advice from mum and dad or family members, and they're providing them with some guidance. But what they don't realise, the guidance that mum and dad might be giving you might have been relevant when they bought a house, but might not be relevant today. What we do here day in, day out is I can't buy a house because I don't have a 20% deposit. Sounds like they got advice from friends and family who purchased many years ago when that was required. You can get a home now with as low as 2% deposit. And that's why it's so important to educate everyone throughout the whole process, from the initial call to the day you get your keys. It's so important, but that's what we're about.
Grab your weekly dose of inspiration to help build a real estate portfolio. We talk to the best in the business every day. Learn from the professionals and know your property with us.
Absolutely. Residential strata is about 15 to 20%, depending on where you are, of the residential housing market. It's not seen as a separate asset class, but because of the nature of title being so different, it should be treated slightly differently. In particular, the rights and obligations of anyone buying into strata are different to buying a freestanding house. And that has an impact not only on a lot owner buying a lot or an apartment, it also probably has longer term impacts on risk in home lending books. It has long-term impacts on the government's ability to deliver on housing. Insurance are also a player in this market, and they all have a role to play in the stakeholder engagement and uplift of knowledge in the population and how to de-risk this sector. And that's because as buildings age and the maintenance requirements of those buildings falls onto volunteer committees, known as strata committees or owners corporations, there's a lot of work that has to be done by people who aren't necessarily knowledgeable in those areas. And then they're leaning on strata managers to help them execute those functions for the safety, security, and long-term asset management of multi-million-dollar properties.
This scheme has been in place since the Morrison government. So what we should do is go through some of the detail, especially for those who are not across this. Like, first off, what are the changes that will come into effect on October the 1st?
Yeah, look, as you touched on, this scheme, originally called the First Home Loan Deposit Scheme, a low deposit scheme to enable first home buyers to get into a property with a 5% deposit, was introduced by the Morrison government in January 2020. The main changes to the scheme from the original scheme is essentially lowering the barriers to entry. So the scheme, that now called the First Home Buyers Guarantee Scheme, has changed in its nature. There'll now be no income caps. There's changes to the pricing caps. So essentially, each state has a property price cap that has increased, and there is now unlimited access. And the access to the scheme has become a lot easier for first home buyers.
Okay, so First Home Guarantee Scheme, it has been somewhat of a political feel-good scheme. I don't think that's unfair to say. Plenty of people have criticised it. Others say expanding on it is the right thing to do. How successful, Anthony, has the scheme been to date for people to sort of be brought up to speed? And what has the take-up looked like?
It was originally limited to 20,000 places being allocated. They were taken up very early by 2022. So the scheme was taken up by first home buyers. It was limited in the providers who could access it, but it essentially, all of the places were taken up in those early days. So first home buyers have used it. It's enabled them to get into the market, and it's been well received by first home buyers over the last couple of years.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.